One can argue that historically, with exception of the colonial period, when both countries suffered, we were two leading entities in the world. I'm not using the term nation because concept of nation state had not
yet emerged
developed at that time. China's rise is more conspicuous because their growth rate has been faster since late 1970s. They have, until recently, they had maintained a growth rate of about 9% per annum, which is very impressive. Now it has come down, but still it's significant. We have also developed well, especially since 1991 when we initiated our own process of reforms. Our growth rate during this period has been 6% plus, which is historically very impressive. One fundamental problem that we have to grapple with is how do we manage this simultaneous re-emergence of India and China?
Right.
Are they supportive of rise of India? My short answer is no. I think this is where the problem starts, that they don't show empathy for rise of India.
Right.
Whereas until recently, in fact, you will agree with me that there was a great degree of admiration for what China has achieved. Especially since 1978 when they started their journey of reforms and opening up. It's a very complex relationship with number of outstanding issues, boundary question being just one of them. Just to illustrate the nature problem, we don't even agree on length of boundary. We say India-China boundary is about 3,488 kilometers. They say no, it's only 2,000 kilometers.
So we don't agree on what's the actual border
So we don't even agree on that. And there are a whole lot of other issues on which we have divergence. They try to change the status quo very seriously at multiple locations. And there was clash in the Galwan Valley on the night of 16 June 2020, which was a traumatic event because prior to that, last clash resulting in loss of life along India-China borders was way back in 1975. So after a gap of 45 years relations went into a sort of sharp downhill movement. We are trying to recover from that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Kitaabi Baatein, a podcast where we make sense of India and the world through the medium of books. I'm your host Abhishek. Today we'll talk about China, its history, its future as a potential superpower, its relation with Pakistan, US, Russia, and most importantly, India. How does the future of China and India as neighbors looks like? Can India trust China? Can India and China move towards normalization of relations? Can India and China solve their border disputes? There are many questions which everyone, from a politician, a bureaucrat, a foreign advisor to a common man of India, wants to know. To discuss about China, I have a very special guest today, a career diplomat. He served as India's ambassador to Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and of course China, and is currently associated with the Vivekanand International Foundation and is one of the foremost voices on China. Ambassador Ashok K, it's absolutely an honor to have you on Kitaabi Baatein.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, sir. And today we'll be discussing about China and about Ambassador Khan's latest book, Decoding China, which brings you a lot of perspective on China. Sir, as I went through your book, there were a lot of interesting insights given in these articles. But one of the things which I wanted to ask you, now we know that China has traditionally been hostile to India. That is the history which shows us that since its inception as an independent state, China has been hostile to India. Yet we are seeing in the recent past, especially due to the pressure tariffs by US, China and India are seemingly warming up to each other. What's your take on that?
Well, as a practitioner of diplomacy and someone who has been involved with China for a very long time, in fact, I studied Chinese in Singapore from 1979 to 81, and then I traveled to Beijing way back in October 1981. And since then, I have done 3 diplomatic assignments in China, including as ambassador, as you mentioned. And I also dealt with China from headquarters. So China has been a very big part of my diplomatic career. And subsequently, after retirement also, I have been involved with China in different ways. One thing which one has tried to do is to avoid stereotyping China or demonizing China. Deliberately, I avoided using the lexicon of China being an enemy or adversary. I preferred alternative term of challenge. Okay, it's a challenge for us, It's also, to a certain extent, an opportunity for us.
Right.
What we are faced with today is something extraordinary. We have only 2 countries with billion plus population.
Yes.
India and China.
China.
And both these countries are rising today. One can argue that historically, with the exception of the colonial period,
Yes.
when both countries suffered, we were 2 leading entities in the world. I'm not using the term nation because concept of nation state had not
Yet emerged.
developed
Yes.
at
Yes.
that time. Through most of recorded history, in fact, 2 largest economies in the world were India and China.
In China. Right.
Then China faced with what they call century of national humiliation.
Right.
They recovered from that in 1949 when People's Republic of China was established, and a different phase started.
That was the era of the Opium War. It started somewhere near
started
that end.
with
Yes.
that. We had our own, more serious brush with the colonial exploitation. When Indian economy, which was by far the largest in the world, around 1700 AD, went into not only stagnation but decline, with massive drain of wealth from India
Right.
to metropolitan center, that is Britain.
Yes.
Now, when both of us are rising simultaneously, China's rise is more conspicuous because their growth rate has been faster since late 1970s. They have, until recently, they had maintained a growth rate of about 9% per annum,
Yes.
which is very impressive. Now it has come down, but still it's significant. We have also developed well, especially since 1991, when we initiated our own process of reforms. Our growth rate during this period has been 6% plus, which is historically very impressive. But this gap of 3 percentage points translate into a big gap emerging between GDPs of India and China, which were more or less identical, in fact, around 1990.
Yes.
Today, China is nearly, their GDP is nearly 4.8 times larger than India's.
That of India,
so
yes.
about $19 trillion
Yes.
compared to about $4 trillion for India. And as their economic strength grew, as they became the largest trading nation in the world, then they surpassed Japan as the second largest economy in the world. Today, they are, definitely second most consequential country in the world, next only to the USA. In different metrics, whether you are talking about the size of economy or technological progress or military strength, they are number 2, no doubt about it. And they would like to emerge as number 1.
Number 1.
I think this is also, we should be very clear about it. They sometimes, in fact, do talk about what they call second centenary goal.
Right.
That is centenary of establishment of People's Republic of China, which will be 1949.
Right.
First centenary goal was centenary of establishment of Communist Party of China.
It was in 2021.
And so that's already behind. Right. Second centenary goal, they would like to emerge as the preeminent power in the world.
Right.
In terms of comprehensive nationalist strength, in terms of influence in Community of Nations, they're moving in that direction. They would like to be the leading technology power also.
Or even overtaking the US.
So basically, overtaking the USA, displacing the USA as the leading
Power of the
preeminent power of the world. India is rising not at the same pace, but we also hope to emerge as a developed nation, Viksit Bharat, by 2047. So we have our own, goal lined up. One fundamental problem that we have to grapple with is how do we manage this simultaneous re-emergence of India and China?
Right.
Are they supportive of rise of India? My short answer is no. I think this is where the problem starts, that they don't show empathy for rise of India.
Right.
Whereas until recently, in fact, you will agree with me that there was a great degree of admiration for what China has achieved.
Yes.
Especially since 1978, when they started, their journey of reforms and opening up. And there are a whole lot of other issues where we find that we can discuss it further, that they have not been helpful.
Right.
So this leads to China challenge.
Yes.
We are faced with. This is the backdrop.
Right.
You raised this question about what's happening today in our relations with China. Again, step back a little bit. It's a very complex relationship with number of outstanding issues. Boundary question being just one of them. Just to illustrate, the nature problem, we don't even agree on length of boundary.
Yes.
We say India-China boundary is about 3,488 kilometers. They say, no, it's only 2,000 kilometers.
So we don't agree on what's the actual border and
So we don't even agree on that.
Right.
And there are a whole lot of other issues on which we have divergence. Despite that, we had ensured by and large that border areas were peaceful. That we had a normal state-to-state and people-to-people relations.
Right.
With fairly extensive trade, economic engagement. We had about 25,000 Indian students in China compared to about half a dozen when I first went to China in 1981. So we had come a long way.
Right.
But that changed. That changed in 2020 in a very dramatic fashion because they tried to undermine a basic prerequisite of our movement towards normal relations.
Right.
That is, while we disagree on boundary issue, neither side will try to change their status quo.
Right.
They tried to change the status quo very seriously at multiple locations, and there was clash in the Galwan Valley on the night of 15th, 16th June 2020, which was a traumatic event because prior to that, last clash resulting in loss of life along India-China borders was way back in 1975. So after a gap of 45 years,
right.
Relations went into a sort of sharp, downhill movement. We are trying to recover from that.
Right.
What we are trying to do now is essentially rebuilding a relationship which is very badly damaged.
Right.
And this process started in right earnest only after Prime Minister Narendra Modi met with President Xi Jinping at Kazan, Russia in October last year. And it was accelerated to some extent when Prime Minister traveled to Tianjin, China for SCO summit and had another meeting with Xi Jinping. But this is still, we are talking about baby steps.
Right.
Because what we are doing is to resume certain people-centric contacts.
Right.
Most recently, we resumed direct flights between India and China. We have eased issuance of visas to some extent. Kailash Mansarovar Yatra, which was suspended, has been resumed. But still, these are early days.
Right.
Likewise, in terms of economic engagement, there is some forward movement, but there are number of problems, including the fact that we have a huge trade deficit
Yes.
with China. Last year, our trade deficit, was more than $100 billion, which is clearly unsustainable.
Correct. So as you rightly mentioned, and you also mentioned, it's a resumption of dialogue, but it's not a reset of ties, as you mentioned in your book. Now, whenever we talk about India-China, the border dispute always comes out, which is quite natural. Now, as I read in your book, the China's position has been of taking a piecemeal approach to resolution of all issues, especially the border issue. But do you think that is a practical idea from India's point of view? Because every now and then, in some way or the other, the border dispute does comes up. And as it is there, also the fact that the line of actual control is not something to which either of the two countries agree to. Do you think keeping that as in a piecemeal manner, solving that, does it really works for India and China?
Well, if you, without going too much into history of boundary question, which is very complex. In April 2005, we signed an agreement on political parameters and guiding principles for settlement to India-China boundary.
Yes. Right.
I happen to be lead negotiator for that agreement from Indian side. And it's a very good agreement where we agreed on a number of key principles and parameters. And one core understanding is that we'll have a package settlement covering all sectors of the boundary. And this was a deliberate decision. Both sides felt that if we try to do piecemeal settlement, sector by sector settlement, it'll be more difficult to arrive at an overall settlement, because many of these concessions will be cross-sectoral.
Right.
That means we are more inclined to make concession in western sector, but in eastern sector, Arunachal Pradesh, we are not in a position to make any major concession as China is demanding.
Right.
So that kind of swap will help. They agree. It's a formal agreement that there should be package settlement. They also agreed that any understanding will be political in nature.
Right.
Because, both sides have their own narratives on India-China boundary. We have a very sort of elaborate cases built by our experts. We had not been able to persuade each other of veracity or strength of a respective case. So if you take that road of exchanging evidence, going into legal claims, we'll never be able to settle boundary question. So we agreed that we'll seek political settlement, take into account the overall interests of two countries, overall relationship. Again, very sensible decision we took. But unfortunately, after we signed that agreement in April 2005, the next step was meant to be a framework for boundary settlement, essentially give and take.
Right.
That India will adjust its position boundary question in these many areas. China will adjust its position in some other areas, and we'll arrive at a mutually agreed framework for settlement of boundary question. Unfortunately, we haven't made headway on that.
Right.
We have not made headway on that because, contrary to what we had conveyed very categorically to them, they would like us to make big concessions in eastern sector, including ceding Tawang. We had made it clear that that is not feasible. In fact, one of the provisions of the agreement signed in 2005 is that both sides will safeguard interests of their settled populations.
Right.
That was done mainly to, sort of preclude any claims of Tawang, for instance. But Chinese have, in a way, gone back on that. So we have not been able to make a breakthrough on framework for boundary settlement. In parallel, as I mentioned, understanding was that we'll respect the line of actual control,
Right.
even though there are some, disagreement on
what exactly the LAC is.
But both sides know more or less that this is line of actual control.
Right.
In practice, unfortunately, that understanding has also been violated by
Yes.
China, which led to our taking the position that state of borders will determine state of relations. This is something articulated very forcefully by Dr. Ashok K, Minister of External Affairs, that unless border areas return to normalcy, we can't have normalcy in relations. Border areas have not yet returned to normalcy. Disengagement has happened, but there's still, deployment of troops in very large numbers, in very difficult terrain. In some areas, we have not been able to resume patrolling
Yes.
As it existed in April 2020
Before Galwan.
before those incidents happened. So there's still unfinished business of restoration of normalcy
Right.
in border areas. So restoration of normalcy in overall relations
Right.
will also take time.
Right.
This is something not going to happen anytime soon.
But I have a question related to this. So what you discuss, it boils down to the fact, and as you mentioned in your book, there's a China's quest for global dominance, and it's definitely seeking territories which it believes unilaterally to be its own, and it's not just the case with India. With such an ambition of ruling the world and through taking territories without even taking the other country into much consideration, do you ever see any hope of a proper settlement between the two countries?
Well, as a former diplomat, I will not be pessimistic. There is hope. We signed this important agreement in April 2005, which provides a very good basis
Right.
for seeking a boundary settlement. But you have very rightly pointed out that China has a pattern of behavior with regard to contested territories.
Yes.
Where it seeks to unilaterally change facts on the ground. And this is something not unique to India-China borders. You can see same pattern of behavior in case of South China Sea.
Yes.
Perhaps that's the most conspicuous example because they reclaimed more than 3,000 acres of land from the sea and militarized those features in areas which others claim.
Right.
Not only claim, in many areas they are within, actually within exclusive economic zone of countries like the Philippines.
Yes.
So what they did was in violation UNCLOS, UN Convention Law of the Seas. The Philippines, in fact, took China to international permanent court of arbitration. And there was a decision of permanent court of arbitration in The Hague in 2016, taking the position that China's claim based on so-called historic rights is without basis.
Yes.
So they completely, in a way, rubbished China's claim. Decision went in favor of the Philippines, but China refused to accept it.
Right.
So, and they have continued to expand their presence in South China Sea, completely disregarding
The verdict of
other countries and disregarding verdict given by permanent court of arbitration. Same is true in East China Sea. You have this island, for instance, what Japan calls Senkaku, China called Diaoyu.
Right.
It's under administrative control of Japan. On that, there is no doubt. But China has ramped up its activity, putting continuous pressure, incursions in what Japan looks at its territorial waters. In Taiwan Strait, likewise, China is engaging in a pattern of behavior which amounts to military, economic, and political coercion of Taiwan. Again, changing facts on the ground incrementally. Something similar has happened along India-China borders.
Correct.
This is sometimes described as grey zone operations.
Yes.
That means, they operate under a threshold to put pressure
On the other country,
without really engaging in outright military conflict.
Right.
And they have been rather successful.
Yes.
Especially in South China Sea, but elsewhere as well. So we have to bear that in mind, that these are unilateral claims.
Right.
But China has described them as its core interests. And also, its indisputable sovereignty. Taking the position will not cede an inch of our territory.
Right.
Now, once you take that position, finding negotiated solutions becomes much more difficult.
Correct.
So, yes, we have a problem. But hopefully, down the road, better sense will prevail, because it's not in interest of either country to let the boundary question linger on.
Right.
In fact, we have formally agreed that an early boundary settlement is a strategic requirement.
Correct.
And this is something required to improve India-China relations. So let's be hopeful that somewhere down the road
we do have a
things will
solution.
change. Yeah,
Right.
we'll have solution.
Right. So as you mentioned, in 1988, it was late Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi ji who visited China, and it was, again, people are talking of, step towards normalization of relations. One thing which was there was that he also agreed in some way or the other to the Chinese viewpoint that let's talk about other things and not just the boundary dispute. So it was, in a sense, a diplomatic victory for China, because they made India agree to its demand. It's been more than 20-30 years since then. How do you see the current government since 2014? What's its strategy towards China?
Stepping back to, you referred to Mr. Rajiv Gandhi's visit, it's true that we did change our position around that time. After 1962 border conflict, there was a resolution in Parliament which required government to retrieve land which had been, illegally, forcefully occupied by China. And government of India took the position that unless the boundary question is settled, it's difficult for us to restore normal relations with China. But gradually, with passage of time, it was felt that more flexibility is required in our position. And after a lot of internal consultation during Rajiv Gandhi's visit in December 1988, a new paradigm was agreed upon. This paradigm involved basically three understandings. One was that they will continue to seek an early boundary settlement. This will be kept, on the front burner of India-China dialogue, so to say. This is not something we'll set aside. In the interim, we'll do two things. One, we will develop relations in other areas without linking it to
the borders,
the boundary questions.
Solutions. Right.
And two, we will respect status quo. So we'll not change the status quo. The third understanding of status quo was formalized in 1993 when we signed an agreement of maintenance of peace and tranquility in border areas. And there were subsequent understanding, 1996, 2005, 2012, 2013. So and we put in place very elaborate confidence building measures, which served us well. As I mentioned earlier, border areas were by and large peaceful. On the whole, I think it was a sensible decision taken by us not to maintain a very rigid position that we will not have any sort of normal dealings with our largest neighbor without settling the borders.
Right.
Because, if relations are completely unsettled, conditions also not conducive to pursue even management of border, let alone, a boundary settlement. Now, fast forward to May 2014, when the present government came to office, when Shri Narendra Modi became Prime Minister of India. I was ambassador in China at that time,
Right.
so I was intimately involved with that period, both the previous government and transition. To India government. What one can say that there are very strong elements of continuity in policy. The basic paradigm I talked about, that let's try and seek early boundary settlement while we develop relations in other areas, that remain unchanged. At the same time, we stepped up measures to see that there is requisite deterrence in border areas to discourage China from doing what they did in 2020. So border infrastructure development was stepped up, other measures were taken. But, the process of seeking improvement of relations, in a way, was accelerated. I recall that soon after new government came to office, there was a request from Foreign Minister Wang Yi. He was Foreign Minister then. Now he's Foreign Minister. There was a short gap, but he returned as Foreign Minister. He wanted to see me. When I met him, he asked me, seeking my advice, so to say, that will it be a good idea if he visits India as a special emissary of President Xi Jinping. I told him that I'll check with my government and get back to him formally. But my immediate personal response is that this looks like a good idea. And I checked with headquarters, Ministry of External Affairs. They welcomed the visit. Mr. Wang Yi was the first foreign minister of any country to come to India in June 2014. And he also, apart from discussions with an External Affairs Minister, Mrs. Sushma Swaraj, he called on Prime Minister and he invited Prime Minister to visit India, but also visit China, but also indicated that President Xi Jinping would like to come to India. And the Prime Minister immediately welcomed the visit, and visit took place in September 2014. It was a very unusual visit because before the visit, I got soundings from Chinese side that President Xi would like to start the visit in Gujarat.
Just Prime Minister's home state.
Yes, Prime Minister's home state.
Right.
And they requested if Prime Minister could receive him there. Now, our protocol indicated it doesn't happen. Visit starts in New Delhi only.
Yes.
Prime Minister can't travel. But I also recommended and Prime Minister decided that yes, he will travel to Ahmedabad. So something very unusual happened.
Right.
Next year, May 2015, when Prime Minister Modi visited China, President Xi reciprocated. The visit started in Xi'an, in President Xi's hometown. He spent almost an entire day with Prime Minister in Xi'an. So this was referred to as hometown diplomacy.
Yeah.
This was for both countries very unusual.
Right.
That shows, interest on both sides to invest in the relationship. And if you look at the period 2014 to 2019, between September 2014 when President Xi came to India and October 2019 when again he came to India, Mamlapuram, the informal summit, second informal summit, there were something like 19 meetings
between
leaders,
PM and
PM and President Xi
Jinping.
So a lot of effort was made. There was continuity in that regard. But we were also noticing that problem areas are building up.
Right.
That, outstanding issues are not getting addressed.
Right.
That China is not being supportive of rise of India, that on certain key issues, in fact, they were taking positions which were hurting us.
Right.
They were not supportive aspirations of India. For instance, India becoming a member of UN Security Council or joining nuclear suppliers group. All those issues, in fact, China was in the forefront of opposition.
Right.
So, tensions had already started building, problems had
Yes.
started accumulating. Things were not going in the right direction.
I think you also mentioned in the book that China is the only big country which does not want India to rise.
Yes, I mean, they're the only major country
Yes.
which has not been
Right.
supportive of rise of India.
Rise of India.
So, this was the backdrop. Prime Minister was quite forceful in pushing our agenda. I was present in some of those meetings where he raised, our concerns quite forcefully. So it's not that we were sort of under any illusion. We read the situation correctly, that despite all the hard work being done by two sides and by Chinese side also, it's not that they were not engaging with us. Relations were not in entirely positive shape. There were a lot of problems, and these problems were going to catch up sooner or later, and they caught up in 2020.
Right. So we were like, in a way, we were back to square one because the dispute was there, and whatever confidence we built in these 18, 19 meetings, but then this clash happened.
In a way, actually, we reached a level in the relationship which can be described as the lowest point in 4 decades.
Right.
So, a lot of gains which were made not only post 2014, but even earlier,
right.
negated.
So
there is now a serious deficit of trust. That explains why, in very difficult, terrain along India-China borders, including Eastern Ladakh, we have to maintain our troops deployed in fairly large numbers with all the requisite equipment.
Right.
And this started in 2020 and we are in 2025.
Right.
This is the 6th winter we are entering.
Yes.
That shows a lack of confidence.
Correct.
Because what happened in May 2020, in a way, caught us on the wrong foot.
Yes, definitely.
They were, holding their annual military exercise in that area, which they did earlier also. Ordinarily, we had a shadow exercise on our side, but it was COVID, you have to remember. So because of COVID, we were all distracted.
Right.
So it was not that we didn't know what they're doing.
Right.
But perhaps it was not anticipated that they will transgress the line of actual control, not at one place, but multiple locations. With the objective of creating new facts on the ground.
Right.
We, of course, moved our forces very rapidly so we could sort of minimize the damage. But relationship was damaged. There's no doubt about it.
So if we see, as we discussed at the beginning, the People's Republic of China, the CPC, they had these centennial goals. And they did not dream, they even worked hard to become a global power outpacing all other countries. When we talk of the history of China, especially since 49, 2 key leaders, Mao and Deng were there, and now it's Mr. Xi Jinping. How do you see Xi Jinping as being different or similar to Mao and Deng's? How do you see his legacy will be, once he demits the office, different to his predecessors?
That's a very good question. What we need to take note of, and this is something, I've tried to address in my long essay in this book also, that China has certain narratives
Yeah.
which are very entrenched. And one narrative is that China, being the preeminent power,
Yes.
is the historical norm.
Yeah.
That historically they were the leading power. It was only during this century
Of humiliation,
national
yeah.
humiliation,
Right.
that they lost ground.
Right.
And what's happening post 1949 is essentially restoring the historical norm.
Right.
So something which should have been there is being restored.
Understood.
So they believe it's the rightful role of China.
Right.
They are trying to revive. So great rejuvenation of Chinese nation is rejuvenation. Word
Yes.
is rejuvenation. It's not that China is becoming great for the first time
Right.
in their reading. Now, this belief of China becoming strong and prosperous, this dates back to late 19th century when they first started, suffering from colonial depredations. And that has been a consistent thread in Chinese, narrative.
Right.
It's an aspiration they have maintained. This is an aspiration they maintained during the period, where Mao Zedong was the leader.
Yeah.
He talked about in his first speech, 1st October 1949, from ramparts of Tiananmen. He talked about China is standing tall again. China is standing up again. And they did, they did show
Yes.
a lot of
Indeed.
determination to recover.
Right.
It's a different matter that in many areas they pursued policies which are very destructive, very irresponsible, which led to massive suffering during Great Leap Forward,
Yes.
during Cultural Revolution. Literally, millions of people died.
Right.
And also their international relations, their own domestic politics and society were badly damaged. But they had, reacquired a sense of confidence nevertheless. You move to the period Deng Xiaoping became the preeminent leader, though he never became, state leader
Yes.
or party leader as such. He was never invited
Yeah.
in that capacity. He was chairman of Central Military Commission. That's the highest rank he held. He started policy of reforms and opening up. And it became a very effective policy. So first China was standing up again. Then China started becoming prosperous.
Yes.
So what they call Fu Chilaila, that means they started becoming prosperous. And we talked about earlier an average growth rate of close to 10%.
Yes.
That led to complete transformation of China, because I've been, as I mentioned earlier, visiting China since 1981. This transformation is very visible, and it has resulted in something like 600 million people being pulled out of poverty, world-class infrastructure, China's emergence as what they call factory of the world,
Yes.
largest trading nation in the world, and more recently also an innovation power.
Yes.
So all that has happened. But as they acquired economic and military clout, the earlier policy that Deng Xiaoping has propounded, which was, keeping a low profile,
Yes.
biding your time,
Right.
gradually that was abandoned.
Right.
Because China felt, now they must play a larger role
And yeah.
on international stage. This started even before Xi Jinping became leader. But after Xi became leader, it was done in a very upfront, direct fashion. And he, in fact, in party congress, he talked about China.
It was a more assertive China under the reign of
We could see
Xi
a more
Jinping, right.
assertive China.
Yeah.
And also, he moved away from Deng's legacy in many areas, both domestic and external. In domestic, he moved away from collective leadership to very sort of systematic succession to personality-centric relationship, to polity, where Xi Jinping is the supreme leader. There's no doubt about it. And also, he has done away with stepping down after 2 terms, as it happened in case of 2 of his predecessors. And in foreign policy, as you mentioned, a far more aggressive stance, where China has been, trying to achieve its contested territorial claims, as we discussed earlier, unilaterally, and not averse to throwing its weight around. Most recently, you have seen how it has weaponized dependence of the world on China for critical materials, like rare earth
material,
magnets.
Yes.
It has been done in a very systematic manner. First, they acquired that stranglehold on supply chain, and then now they're deploying that strength they have, that stranglehold they have. This is just one example, but what they have done in recent years is to reduce their dependence on others, so that they are less vulnerable, to make others dependent on them. And that is also done very systematically. So they have pressure points available. We have a problem there, because we depend on China for so many key imports, which can be...
India runs a huge trade deficit with China.
Huge trade deficit.
That's the case with many countries, in fact.
Many countries. So, and they have put in place very elaborate, learning from USA, a sanctions regime, counter-sanctions regime. They diversified their own trade so that they're less dependent on USA. Their own procurement, they've reduced from USA in areas like soybean, for instance. So they have moved very strategically. And clearly, they have an objective. Objective is to emerge as the preeminent power, first in Asia Pacific, eventually globally. Whether they'll succeed or not, that's a different question altogether. Because, they are, faced with one slowdown economy, which is very palpable. They have serious economic problems. 2, they have aging population. So, it's aging very rapidly. 3, they have huge debt. They have built up. It's more than 300% of GDP. 4, productivity of economy is beaten out. It has plateaued. And externally, their aggressive behavior has led to pushback. There are concerns about China's behavior. It's so powerful, people are reluctant to criticize them publicly. But there is anxiety about their behavior, including in India. You would have noticed how sentiments about China have soared, especially since 2020. Prior to that, we were by and large, appreciative of what they had achieved. But today, there is much greater.
So as you mentioned these last 4 points, which is like what could go wrong with China, and as you talked about in the book, is China peaking. So you did raise these points, something which can spoil the party for China, but at the same time you mentioned that especially due to technological advancements, China will be a step ahead of other countries. So on the net basis, if we take the positives and the negatives, or the plus and the minus, how do you see China in what position in, say, next 20 to 30 years?
It's very difficult to project what will happen in the future. And that's something, by and large, we should avoid doing. Extrapolating present trends and coming to conclusions about what will happen 10 years,
or 20 years
down the road. because by doing that, sometimes we can make serious mistakes. You'll recall how Japan was rising very rapidly, and there was this talk of Japan as number one.
Number one, yes.
And it was supposed to sort of overtake USA not too distant a future, at least in economic domain.
Yes.
Not militarily, but in economic domain. But then Japan, got into a cycle which led to stagnation in economy.
Yes. Lost decades.
As they say.
Yeah.
And in fact, it hasn't fully recovered from that.
That's true.
So no one talks about Japan as number one now. In fact, its GDP is either stagnant or contracts.
Contracting,
And so, we will not too distant future, India will overtake Japan, in terms of size of GDP. China their GDP is several times larger than Japan, though they had overtaken Japan's GDP only about 15 years ago. So they have moved well ahead. So you can see how those projections
can go wrong.
Can go completely wrong.
True.
Coming to China, I referred to, baggage China is carrying. I have argued in my essay that we should not buy into hypothesis of China having already peaked. There is, a growing body of opinion among Western scholars who are saying that Chinese economy has run out of steam.
Yes.
And now, in fact, it's declining. And we shouldn't really believe all the numbers which are trotted out by Chinese party state. I don't know about numbers. There might be some problems with numbers. But I don't think China has run out of growth momentum altogether. It has serious problems, no doubt about it. But it's also finding new drivers of growth.
Right.
And the most important being, innovation as a driver of growth. It has invested a lot in developing its capabilities in frontier technologies,
right,
and achieved a lot. In fact, there is this critical technology tracker which is maintained by ASPI, Australian think tank. And in the last report earlier this year, they came to the conclusion that out of 64 technologies they're tracking, China is now leading in 57.
57.
It may be a bit of an exaggeration because West tends to sort of hype up a little bit capabilities of its opposition. And sometimes, research is done not in public case, it's done quietly. But no doubt about the fact that China is now an innovation power.
Yes.
It has proved people who argued that a relatively authoritarian society cannot innovate. They have proved them wrong. In any case,
absolutely,
that hypothesis was always wrong. Because China historically, like Sung period for instance, it was very productive in terms of technological discoveries. But it was also a relatively closed period for Chinese polity and society. So this is one area, innovation. Second is manufacturing. Xi Jinping prioritizes what he calls real economy as distinct from virtual economy. USA, as you know, economy is largely financial economy. It's not so much manufacturing. Manufacturing as percent of GDP has come down very dramatically, though President Trump is again trying to boost manufacturing. Xi Jinping is very clear about China maintaining its lead in manufacturing and increasingly dominating technology-led, innovation-led manufacturing, and they are succeeding in many areas. If you look at energy transition, areas like solar energy, wind energy, electric vehicles, lithium-ion batteries. In these areas, by far, they are the number one.
They are number one.
They are
absolutely
dominating the global supply chains and value chains. So, in fact, to the extent that is leading to retarded industrialization elsewhere.
Right.
Both among developed countries and developing countries like India. Because China has developed a massive overcapacity.
Yes.
So it can, sell goods abroad at prices others can't compete with.
Right.
It has a humongous industrial policy.
Correct.
There was a report by International Monetary Fund in August this year, which came to the conclusion that China is devoting 4.5% of GDP, and its GDP is in excess of $19 trillion, to supporting its industrial policy. And it pointed out that it's unable to factor in several elements, like support given by local governments.
Right.
Other scholars have concluded that if you include those components, China might be spending as much as 7 to 8% of GDP to support industrial policy. So others are sort of protesting that you can't just suck oxygen out of the entire global value chain when it comes to high-tech manufacturing. So it has its strong points. Whether those strong points will be strong enough to compensate for drag in Chinese economy because of slowdown of real estate, aging population, slowdown in productivity, debt burden, and those areas, we don't know yet.
At this juncture, yes.
I would like to give them benefit of doubt rather than arriving at a conclusion that the Chinese economy is going to plateau or peak anytime soon.
So you talked about technology, innovation, support to manufacturing, which is driving the Chinese growth. How do you see these steps in the light of the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative? Because as your book suggests, they are focusing a lot on, construction. They focus a lot on energy. I think 30 to 40% of the projects are related to energy. So in a way, it's securing, energy production and supplies for themselves, for the country itself. Especially with Pakistan, some of the initiatives are not doing that well. We have this Sri Lanka debt fiasco. In the light of all this, how do you see the Belt and Road Initiative for the next couple of years or decades?
Belt and Road Initiative, what Xi Jinping initially called One Belt, One Road.
One Road,
OBOR. The Chinese name has not changed. It's still Itai, Ilu, which translates into One Belt, One Road.
Right.
But the English version they have changed to Belt and Road Initiative because they didn't want to give the impression that it's only one belt, one road they're talking about. In practice, it is a Chinese project.
Yes.
It's not a multilateral project. All projects which are undertaken, they are undertaken bilaterally by China with different countries. So it's not something which is put together under any BRI forum, Belt and Road Forum. No, there only announcements are made.
Right.
But projects are undertaken by China. So far, China, according to numbers they give, has put in more than $1 trillion.
Yes.
That makes it by far the most ambitious project or initiative
ever undertaken
by any country, in fact, in infrastructure development. And this signature initiative of Xi Jinping also.
Yes.
I think we need to understand that. A lot of resources have been put there, which are mostly deployed through loans. Now they are putting in more investment also, more FDI, but until recently, mostly
debt
loans.
financed, yes.
And loans were also not given in particularly concessional terms. There was some element of concession, but not a large element of concession. Initially, focus was on large infrastructure projects. And there were several drivers. One driver was to utilize Chinese excess capacity because it had built up huge excess capacity. The steel, for instance, very big capacity.
Yes.
Cement in different areas. How to deploy that capacity so that their growth engine could keep humming,
Sustain, yes.
moving. And infrastructure, they'd invested so much within China that room for continued investment on very large scale was less, much less. That was one. But that was only one part. There were other areas. It was primarily a geopolitical initiative. It wanted to develop a sort of universe which was China-centric.
China-centric, yes.
By deploying funds to develop projects, sometimes not just infrastructure projects, but they could be manufacturing project, could be soft power project. So they were creating a universe which was China-led.
Yes.
China designed, China implemented. Most of implementation is carried out by Chinese companies. They're not done by local companies.
Right.
Often, in fact, they even send labor to many of the countries to carry out projects. As they moved along, they also reviewed outcomes. They found that they can't keep putting that kind of money, especially in countries which don't have good repayment capacity, so leading to debt distress. And it was becoming, a reputational damage to China, especially what happened in Hambantota port. Because
in Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka's inability to
repay,
service
that debt,
let alone repay debt.
Yes.
They had to hand over the port to Chinese entities on a 99-year lease. So they did course correction to some extent. I think they shifted target countries to areas like Middle East and Gulf. Countries which are in a much better position
financially to
repay
the
loans. Or Southeast Asia. They are doing a lot of projects in Southeast Asia. In fact, in a way, they de-emphasized South Asia. It became less important compared to early years of Belt and Road Initiative. I expect the BRI to continue with changed focus, perhaps reduced allocation of funds. Though last 1 year, once again, allocation of funds has gone up. After a slowdown which we saw post-COVID, it has again started going up. Because, this is not a project which should be judged only on the basis of on ROI, return on investment. No. It is a geopolitical investment. Return is also different. And they believe where they are getting. Just to give you example, Chinese entities have a massive network of ports controlled by them. Well over 100 port terminals controlled by Chinese companies, which gives them advantage in different areas, not just in for movement of cargo, but they can be sort of deployed later as dual use facilities, kind of information or intelligence you get from these ports, or building sort of stakes in those countries, dependencies.
So the BRI is not just...
so you have to look at that, that those returns are different. and those returns are still accruing.
Not just financial,
It's
but
not just financial, but they have become more cautious.
yes,
So now they are doing due diligence on projects. They are not just putting in money. Even Pakistan, in fact, they're more careful.
yes,
So it's not that China-Pakistan economic corridor is going to be jettisoned, but they're not putting, as much money as they used to do earlier.
Right.
So there's course correction, there's recalibration, but BRI itself, they regard as a success story.
yes.
And they are likely to continue also because it's a signature initiative
True.
of the Supreme Leader,
Right.
Xi
Xi
Jinping.
Jinping. Okay, two last questions. One is, now, as we know, no discussion on China can be complete without a discussion on China-Pakistan relation. Now, they have friendly relations, and that's as an irritant for India. And they are friends, and China supports Pakistan a lot. That's no longer a secret. Everyone knows it. How do you see India in the context of this China-Pakistan friendship? And second question is, all the major countries, China, Russia, as you talked about in your book, they are also warming up to each other. China, US, whatever the relations are. But these relations will affect India's future as well. So what can happen and what should India do to carve out its space in the geopolitical domain?
Actually, you are asking more than one question. So let me take up these questions one by one, just to maintain a degree of clarity for your audience. Let's begin with the China-Pakistan relationship. Now, China-Pakistan relationship is perhaps the most durable relationship China has with any country.
Right.
And Pakistan has with any country. It's a strategic nexus which they have developed since early 1960s. In 1963, China and Pakistan signed so-called boundary agreement, under which, in fact, Pakistan ended up ceding our territory in Shakshkam Valley to China.
To China,
Large chunk of territory was handed over to China. But, that created conditions for China developing Pakistan as what they call all-weather friend or a strategic partner. And that's true, in fact, because China found in Pakistan a very useful entity where it can make some investment and get large returns, mainly to keep India off balance.
Off balance.
So what kept China and Pakistan together, what worked as a strategic glue between two countries, was their shared desire in keeping India off balance.
Off balance. Right.
Now, this manifested in different ways.
Right.
Pakistan has been by far the largest recipient of Chinese arms.
Yes.
But China did something which was very unusual. It helped Pakistan develop its nuclear weapon program.
Yes.
There was massive collaboration, both covert and overt, between China and Pakistan in nuclear field. China is believed to have shared design of a nuclear weapon with Pakistan, perhaps help it test a weapon on a Chinese facility. And Pakistan also provided some useful technology, especially what A.Q. Khan had managed to steal from the Netherlands, uranium enrichment technology. Same is true of missile development program, where Pakistan was given very substantive help by China and to some extent by North Korea also. Pakistan became a nuclear weapon state with a very active support
from China,
connivance of China. So this, it has to be borne in mind. And they kept providing, Pakistan support in different areas, diplomatically, also, more recently, financially. That wasn't the case earlier. Earlier, they didn't get involved in economic development to Pakistan in a big way. But beginning 2015, when China-Pakistan Economic Corridor was launched, CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, has become the flagship project of BRI, Belt and Road Initiative. Something like $60 billion has been committed.
It is massive.
Yeah, massive to CPEC. And that's continuing. Now they launched CPEC 2.0, the second edition of CPEC. But there are a few things which happened we must take note of. One, earlier, China's strategic investment in Pakistan was mainly India-centric, to keep India off balance. But as China's ambitions increased, it found utility of Pakistan in other areas as well, as an access point to Arabian Sea, Indian Ocean, for dealings with Afghanistan, especially, during earlier, in fact, during rapprochement with USA, Pakistan played a very important role in early 1970s. So it has, in a way, over the years, redefined its utility for China. Pakistan has been able to do that. So Pakistan remains possibly the most important strategic partner for China. If you exclude Russia from the picture, I'll come to that later. And at present, it's not just India-centric. They have a broader utility for Pakistan. So there's one point. Second point I would like to make, which is very important in the current context. During Operation Sindoor, the short conflict we had with Pakistan from 7th to 10th May this year, we saw level of operational collaboration between Pakistan Armed Forces and China,
Chinese,
which was unprecedented. They had never given that kind of battlefield support to Pakistan through provision of ISR inputs, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance data. They made available their satellite navigation data. PETO is their satellite navigation system. They made available that. They apparently helped with integration of weapon systems. And they were providing real-time intelligence to Pakistan, which has been confirmed publicly by Deputy Chief of Army Staff of India. So it moved into a different level altogether, which has changed our defense calculus quite significantly. Because when we look at Pakistan theatre, we have to look at China operating from behind. And very often, support can be given without showing your hand.
Correct.
Because you are talking about network-centric warfare today. And China can provide that kind of support. And one expects that certain vulnerabilities in Pakistan's defense infrastructure, which became obvious during Op Sindoor, China will take steps to address those shortfalls. So it's a relationship one expects will continue to develop. It's a durable relationship which has very serious and negative implications for us.
Very true.
Now coming to Russia, your second question. I'm not going to history of China's relations with the former Soviet Union and Russia. it was, they started with alliance.
Yes.
They had a very bad falling out in late 1950s and early 60s. Incidentally, India was among the first countries to take note of the fact that there is Sino-Soviet rift before others could identify that. There was a long period of estrangement between China and Soviet Union, and then breakup of Soviet Union. They could arrive at boundary settlement and progressive improvement of relations. But we have seen a new phase in development of relations post 2014, when, as you're aware, Russia got involved in Ukraine.
Yes.
And it captured, occupied Crimean Peninsula. China never formally accepted Russian acquisition of Crimea, but the West, imposed sanctions on Russia. Russia was thrown out of G8. It was, sort of, West tried to ostracize it, not very successfully. That created conditions for China-Russia relations to really flourish.
Right.
As Russia came under greater pressure from the West, it moved closer to China. And that process was accelerated when Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022. So it became, Russia's need for China increased so much more. Now, at this point of time, it has become somewhat asymmetric relationship.
Right.
Where Russia's dependence on China is quite significant. But this is still a fairly strong relationship because both of them have shared concerns about West. They don't trust the West.
Yes.
And they see the need for developing close partnership, though they don't call it alliance. They're very clear that they're not alliance.
But it's a distrust of the West which brings them closer.
And also, other areas there are practical considerations. Like Russia, its main exports are energy, oil and gas. And China is the largest purchaser of oil and gas.
Yes.
And so they have developed these pipelines for gas and oil. And it's a thriving trade. As you're aware, once these sanctions imposed on Russia, China became number one buyer of Russian oil and gas. India was number two. We paid the price of 25% punitive tariff, but Trump has not imposed any punitive tariff on China. So it's a relationship which has become strong, in strategic terms, in terms of defense collaboration, economic collaboration, in diplomatic collaboration. And I expect it to continue to develop like that for some time, though there are serious contradictions also. Russia is not very comfortable with this kind of relationship which is unequal in character. Turning to USA. Now again, this is the most consequential relationship we have between two of the greatest powers, where USA and China. It's a relationship where there is strategic rivalry. Because China would eventually like to displace USA as a preeminent power, though they say they have no such intention. There is a very active technological competition which is going on, where USA is taking steps to slow down China's rise. And Chinese are very clear, in fact. Officially, they state that US-led West is trying to contain and suppress China. That is their reading of US policy. But, in recent months, focus has shifted to Mr. Trump's tariff war.
Yes.
And tariff war is being waged not only on China but globally.
Right.
He tried to impose, in fact, one point of time, 145% tariff on imports of China. China retaliated
Yes.
up to 125% tariff. But they took number of other steps. I will not go into specifics, but point is that China made Mr. Trump blink.
Yes.
So Trump had to agree to a trade truce. China also wanted that because, as we discussed earlier, its economy is hurting. USA is the largest export destination.
Yes.
So it wanted things to sort of cool down. But it took a fairly hardline position.
Right.
It was not willing to make unilateral concessions,
Right.
as others have done. EU, Japan, Korea, Australia, UK, they've all made unilateral concessions, not China. So it stood firm. And it deployed its own leverage. You're aware of denial of rare earth magnets, stopped buying soybeans, another agriculture produced from USA. So now, most recently in Busan, on the margins APEC summit, there has been a truce of sorts.
Right.
So they de-escalated this, trade friction which was unfolding. But it's not addressing underlying
Issues.
problems,
Yes.
issues in the relationship. That will continue. Now, coming to implications for us,
Yes.
if I could just, since that was your question, all three have serious implications for us. Let's begin in the reverse order. USA. President Trump's policy towards China in his second term is very different from that he had pursued in his first term. In first term, he had declared that China is our strategic competitor and must be addressed. Likewise, he started policy of Indo-Pacific. Quad was revived after lying dormant for almost a decade. That line is no longer being pursued.
Correct.
He has sort of downgraded strategic competition with China. He's not talking about pivot to Indo-Pacific or trying to sort of engage in a competition with China to slow down its rise, anything, or counterbalance it. He's not seeking that. He is primarily looking at China as an economic rival. And so it's geoeconomics which is in command at this point of time. And he has also made concessions. In fact, just before his meeting with President Xi in Busan, he talked about G2, that USA and China working together with some kind of G2 arrangement, which has always been anathema for us. Also, his lack of emphasis in Indo-Pacific or countering China as a strategic challenge has meant that one core aspect of rationale for closer strategic partnership between India and the USA has been weakened.
Yes.
So the strategic dimension of India-US relationship has been weakened. And in parallel, you are aware of what he has done on various issues, on Pakistan, on kind of on tariffs, 50% tariff, which is very high, possibly the highest imposed on any country at this point of time. A number of negative signals which have come. So that has led to a situation where India-US relations, which was on upward trajectory for close to quarter of a century. There were some ups and downs, but secular trend was positive. Today is under stress. So we are not sure to what extent we can depend on USA in our own sort of efforts to deal with China challenge. Can we really depend on external balancing of China? We are not sure.
Right.
When we talk about the de-risking vis-a-vis China, should we also talk about de-risking vis-a-vis USA? Because it's also deploying the same tools.
Correct.
It has also weaponized interdependence the way China has done. So it has serious implications for us. How we deal with USA, how do we deal with China, foreign policy in general. Coming to Russia, Russia remains an essential partner for us, as USA also is essential partner. I mean, we are not, we would like to retrieve that relationship to the maximum extent possible. Whether we'll succeed, we don't know. Likewise, Russia is important for us, not only as a supplier of weapon systems, as source of energy resources, but also as a diplomatic partner.
Yes.
A country with which we have worked closely in the past.
Yes.
So, in keeping with our general stance of strategic autonomy, we would like to engage closely with Russia.
Right.
So, President Putin will be visiting India in December.
Yeah.
And we are not inclined to sort of downgrade our relations with Russia, even though there is pressure from USA and EU. But fact remains that Russia has unhealthy dependence on China today, which can...
Something India should be very cautious
about. We have to be wary of. In difficult situations, will they provide the spare parts? So far we have done. They have done. During Eastern Ladakh crisis, they did not hold back on those things. But they are subject to pulls and pressures from China, which we have to bear in mind.
Right. Absolutely. I think so for Indian diplomacy, it's time to be cautiously optimistic. That's how I would say when it comes to dealing with Russia, US and China. I think
if I could, I mean, it's little more serious than that. One can argue that we are in a difficult spot today. We are in a difficult spot because there's a global churn, which is very unpredictable. Donald Trump himself is someone who unleashes chaos.
Yes.
But many of the forces which are in evidence were not created by him. Actually, he's product of those forces and he's accelerated those trends. So those forces and those trends will outlast Mr. Trump. So we have to be prepared. It's a changed world we are dealing with.
Absolutely.
So we have to get used to that world, which is more difficult world for us. Number two, globalization is being redefined.
Yes.
So today, it will go away, but international climate in which we seek our development, our objective of Viksit Bharat, developed India by 2047, is far more challenging. It's much less conducive compared to climate China had when it was seeking, its development. Thirdly, as we discussed earlier, we had depended on US as an essential partner. There are question marks about that relationship.
Right.
And it's doubtful we'll be able to go back to what we had prior to Mr. Trump's second innings.
Right.
Fourthly, China challenge will continue. It will continue. It will remain the most important strategic challenge for India, even though we are seeking to develop what Prime Minister mentioned, a stable, predictable and constructive relationship with China. But it will be difficult. It will be a complex relationship. And finally, if I may say so, our neighborhood is not looking particularly good.
Right.
We have serious challenges not only vis-a-vis Pakistan but elsewhere as well.
Right.
So we have to recalibrate our foreign policy. Perhaps we have to lower our strategic aspirations at this point of time. We have to focus in a determined, single-minded fashion of building our capabilities.
Right.
Economic capabilities, military capabilities, technological capabilities. So, in a way, do what Deng Xiaoping advised China to do. Bide your time.
Right.
So,
And
create
develop your
capabilities
strength. Yeah.
and bide your time.
Right. So yeah, undoubtedly these are difficult times, but let's hope that India does face these challenges and emerges stronger. Just like China's dreams of becoming a superpower, we as Indians too have a lot of expectations from India and its rise in the global domain. Ambassador Kantha, thank you so much for the interaction today. I must say it's not just a podcast, I take it as a masterclass on diplomacy and India-China relations.
Yeah. Abhishek, if you permit, I don't want to leave on a pessimistic note.
Yeah, sure, sir, please.
So let me make this final comment.
Yeah.
That yes, these are challenging times, not only for India, but for others as well.
Right.
But these are not worst of times. We have a lot of strengths. We have, a youthful population. We have our talent. We have our resources. And in many ways, what we are faced with today is not really as challenging as what we had to say after second Pokhran test in 1998.
Right.
When we are subjected to sanctions, when there was a pincer attack from USA and China on us, not militarily, but diplomatically, economically. And even Russia was not very helpful.
Yes.
But we recovered ground very quickly.
Yes.
So I believe we have the capacity to recover ground and continue onwards towards our objective of Viksit Bharat, developed India by 2047.
Absolutely. I do like the optimism on the optimistic note on which we're ending this podcast, and let's hope it works that way. Ambassador Khan, thank you so much for your time. As I said, it's not just a podcast, it was a masterclass on diplomacy and in India-China relations. And all those who are watching the podcast, this is one book, again, I strongly recommend if you want to understand what exactly is diplomacy, how did India-China relations went through, and what is expected from the future, then this book is for you. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Abhishek.